Hey y'all, and good now whenever and wherever this finds you. And happy destiny. I learned that from Faye this week. In Chinese, there's a word, and it means happy, but it's your destiny at the same time. As you know, I've been studying Lao Tzu, how the ancient philosophy can converge with modern technology, and I made a video about how AI suggested we live in a decentralized, autonomous communities, and I thought that was really good. Anyway, so I'm studying Chinese culture because I'm reading the writing on the wall, and it looks like China's on the way up, and we're on the way down. I want to believe that China is a good influence. So it turns out there's this guy, Cyrus Jannssen.
My name is Cyrus Jannssen, coming live from my home here in Nevada, of the United States.
And he lived in China for 10 years. He lived in Canada for 5. Now it appears he's in Nevada. He's helping us to understand China. So it was like all the things I wanted to know about China. He basically said them in the 10 things that he learned about China. Now I edited it down a lot. Let's take a look at exactly what it was that he was saying.
The vast majority of Westerners now have a negative perception of China, but I believe the reason for that is a lack of understanding. You see, it's only natural for us to fear something that we don't understand. But I'm an American citizen that lived in China for over 10 years, and I have a very different perspective than the typical Westerner who fears China, but has yet to spend a single day inside that country. And China is one of the fastest growing places in the world. It's an incredible country, but there definitely needs to be better nuance and more understanding. Now, the second lesson I learned is how important education is inside the Chinese society. And this is something that we really observe when you look at even Chinese immigrants that come to the United States. Many times we look at Chinese immigrants and we say, wow, they're incredibly hardworking. They're very smart. They are very successful usually. And it's because of this hard work ethic. Now, when I first went to China, I had a translator, and she told me that growing up, her mother said, I'm not going to teach you how to cook, because for you, the most important thing is to get a good education. I want you to get a good education because this is going to be your ticket into a better life. And we want you to make sure that you can learn English, that you study hard, and that you can have amazing opportunities. And that is what's so incredible. If you're from my parents' generation in China, you grew up in a very large, poor, agrarian society. But you've also been witness to the greatest economic boom in the past 50 years. And China's government being able to lift over 700 million people from poverty into the middle class. And this is the goal for almost every Chinese family. Let's get the next generation better. Let's make sure that our children are well educated. We're going to prioritize that because that is going to be the pathway to getting a better life in the future.
So speaking of education, this is exactly the opposite of what we do in this country. And yet I have a friend who has a newborn, I don't know, maybe 6 or 9 months old, I'm not sure. Then I know of my friend Faye is raising her child, homeschooling, and so there's a question of what will education be like in our future, and it certainly is not going to be like what it is in public education or private schools for that matter. It's going to be more AI assisted, and each child is going to be developed upon their own wants and desires and what their passions are about. And parents will be learning from their children. And so that's the education we need in this country. So let's get back to the video.
Now, the third lesson I learned is that Chinese people are actually some of the best problem solvers I've ever met. There's a phrase in Chinese called 想办法. And 想 means to think. 办法 means a solution. And what's interesting is that when you're living life in China, sometimes you'll encounter some difficulties. Sometimes you'll encounter a situation that seems almost impossible. But this is the phrase that Chinese people always use. 想办法. 哇塞，我们就碰到这个很困难的一个事情的，没关系，我们就想办法。It is this ability to think of a solution. And this is really goes into more of a mindset. A lot of times when I'm back here in America, sometimes people will say to me, Cyrus, it's not possible to do that. We got to think of something else. I don't think we can do that. And immediately I remember my experiences in China and I think to myself, 没关系。我们就想办法，一定要想办法。And you can immediately start to problem solve. So actually it is more of a mindset thing, and this is something that Chinese people taught me. It's really helped me a lot in life is to always think of a solution, to never give up, and to continue to work very hard.
This always thinking of a solution is so in line with what I learned as a carpenter, and I feel so blessed to have lived a life of a carpenter where it took me 3 years to overcome what I called my education, where I was taught that everything was a problem to be solved. And in carpentry, I've realized that everything is a solution to be discovered. And it's just so different. It is a mindset. This is the mindset that's going to be in the new paradigm where people are going to be thinking in terms of solutions and not problems. John Lennon said a long time ago, there are no problems, only solutions. Let's see what else this man has to say on the video.
Now, the fourth lesson I learned in China is that the average Chinese person knows significantly more about America and the Western world than Americans and the Western world knows about China. We have this perception in the United States that the Chinese people are essentially cut off from the world. They have no idea what's going on outside the world and that they live in this bubble called China. Don't forget, before the COVID pandemic, the Chinese were the #1 tourists in the world, making over 100 million trips around the world and amazingly making 100 million trips back home to China. Chinese people are well traveled. They're well educated, and they are very, very curious about the outside world. For example, Chinese students now take 12 years of English, and it's been incredible to watch the rise of the English language inside of China. You talk to any of the new generation, and many of these children speak phenomenal English. It's actually really incredible to see. And this is something that I just want more Americans to understand, because growing up in America, we always learn about our home country. America has been a superpower for many, many years now, and it's actually a double-edged sword, because many Americans, we don't learn about other cultures, we don't learn about other countries. We typically don't care. We only want to know about America. But this is one of the things that I've been really amazed to see from the Chinese is this ability to learn about the world around us. I mean, you can talk about incredible history, complex geopolitics, and a lot of Chinese are very well educated. It will really come as a surprise. So I think this is another great lesson, is just your ability to, understand more of the world around you. This is something that the typical American certainly does not have in their toolbox. But for me as an American that lived abroad, this is something that I really value and is really one of the most valuable experiences of me leaving America and living abroad, especially in China. Now, the fifth lesson that I learned while living in China is the ability to save money. And I tell you, this is one of the biggest differences between the United States and China. In the United States, we live on debt. Our government is filled with debt. The average American is consumed with debt. We live in a culture where in America, if you don't have it, and you want it, get a credit card, pay a bunch of interest payments, and just live your American dream. Get whatever you want. The problem with this is that we have a record number of Americans that simply can't afford things and are just living and drowning in debt. Now, the incredible thing is that the very opposite is true for Chinese people. Now, the sixth lesson that I learned was the ability to have an open mind. And I believe that this is one of the most important skills that I've been able to develop. And I think that it really has been very instrumental into me achieving success, as I've been living abroad for over 15 years. Now, the interesting thing is that growing up in America, we are often told that, America is the best country in the world. We have the best government in the world. We are the best. We're America. We're #1. And it's very easy for many American expats and Westerners to come to China with all of these preconceived notions. A lot of expats come to China and think, well, the American or the Western way is superior to anything in China. Therefore, you need to do things our way. But the interesting thing is that Chinese civilization has been a continuous thing for over 5,000 years. There's a lot of things that we need to learn from China as well. And I think it's really important that when you go to China, you don't go to China with these preconceived notions. And that's really something that I would recommend for anybody that travels abroad. And again, it's all about 想办法. Think of a solution. How do we work together? How do we find a way to coexist? And again, it's very difficult to do that when you approach things with a closed mind. So be open-minded. And that's again why I'm making this video, because If you're one of those Westerners that have a negative perception of China, I challenge you. Why don't you go to China? Go experience it for yourself and see what China is really like. Have an open mind. Be more willing to try new things. Learn a little bit about China. Learn a little bit about Chinese culture. It's going to go a long way. And that's essentially what we're trying to do on this YouTube channel, is to build bridges, is to how do we find a way, how do we 想办法 and find a way to coexist on this planet. We've only got one world. The eighth lesson that I learned in China is that China is more similar to a continent than it is a country. And let me explain what I mean by this. A lot of times we look at China as a one single place. It's a land full of 1.4 billion Chinese people. But China is incredibly much more complex than that. In China, there are over 56 different ethnic minorities that comprise Chinese people. And it's really important to understand that, because right now in China, there are over 300 different dialects that are spoken throughout the country. So when you say that Chinese people speak Chinese, it's a true statement. But what language, what dialect do they speak? Because if you're in Shanghai and you're speaking to a local Shanghairen, they'll be speaking Shanghainese to you. And if you go around the country, you'll hear all of these different dialects. You go to the north, they eat different types of food. Down in the south, we have dim sum. Out west, you in Chongqing, Chengdu, 他们都喜欢吃辣的, right? They love to eat very spicy food. And so you have this amazing variety of experiences and languages and cultures and food. There is so much diversity inside of China. I think you could spend a lifetime traveling in China and it wouldn't be enough. There's just so much to see. And that's just one thing I want people to have a little bit better perspective of China. Again, we look at it as this one single place, but it's incredibly diverse. And that's why it's also such a complex nation, because there are a lot of different languages being spoken. And how does China unite? How does China unite 1.4 billion people together? And that's why the government has gone on a very big mission of promoting the Mandarin language, making sure that every Chinese citizen, in addition to their local dialects, is able to speak Mandarin. So they have that common tongue and the nation can unite. And it's an incredible thing when you start traveling in China and seeing how incredibly diverse that country is. Now, the next lesson is probably the most important one in this entire video, and it is that we are more similar than we are different. And this is what I want you to understand. A lot of Westerners, when we look at China, we forget that there are 1.4 billion people living in China that are really no different than you and me, okay? Every Chinese person, they want the same things in their lives that we do here in America or other Western countries. They want to have a good job. They want to make sure that their children are taken care of. They want to make sure that the next generation lives a better life than we get to live. And this is what they're working hard. And this is really what I want people to understand, is that when we start looking at China, I want you to think of the Chinese people there. I want you to know that many Chinese people are extremely happy. They're extremely proud of their country. They're proud of the rise that has happened over the last 50 years. And quite frankly, many Chinese people are just very happy with their quality of lives. It has been improving a tremendous amount. There are literally hundreds of thousands of foreigners that call China home. And this is what I want people to have. And I hope that I can give you this perspective in today's video, is that China is a lot more similar to the same things that we have here in the Western world. And in many ways, even sometimes a lot better. When we look at, for example, just how advanced technology is inside China. I mean, they truly are inventing some incredible technologies that are going to change the future of our world. And I think it's really important for people to have a much more open mind and be open to learning from China. What these phrases in both Western and Chinese culture are teaching you is that we need to live our life to the best here on earth. When we come into this world, we have nothing. And when we leave this world, we will also have nothing. And it's basically encouraging you to keep things in perspective, that we just need to live the best life that we can and really be that change that we want to see in the world. My name is Cyrus Jannssen, coming live from my home here in Nevada of the United States. Everybody, stay positive, and I will see you all in our next video soon.
Well, I feel a lot better about the fact that China is becoming a dominant force in the world. That was very interesting, and I really feel an alignment with those philosophies and ideas that he was speaking about. And so I'm going to continue my study about China, and I do believe that we can learn from them. He's saying that their civilization is 5,000 years old. That was a very positive, uplifting feeling, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you down the road.